You were never supposed to hear this. In the dying mist of a December morning in 1832, deep in the moss-choked woods of northern Georgia, an entire family vanished without a sound, except for one thing: a single candle still burning on the dining table of the Miller estate, plates untouched, chairs scraped back, and the front door wide open, as if they had simply stood up and walked into the dark. For nearly 2 centuries, the story has been buried beneath a crust of folklore, local superstition, and whispers the church dared not write down. But there's something they never told you, something not in the records, not in the newspapers, because the Millers weren't just another pioneer family. They were part of an experiment, one hidden behind southern charm and whitewashed fences, a design that required them to disappear. And what if I told you this wasn't an isolated tragedy, that similar patterns, eerily identical, appear every 23 years across counties that have no connection on paper? The same symbols carved into the attic beams, the same black envelopes sent weeks before, the same children drawing circles with no explanation. Do you feel it already? That pull in your stomach like you've just stepped off a cliff but haven't hit bottom yet? You will. This isn't a ghost story. It's worse. This is about what happens when history is twisted into a cage, when institutions don't just fail you, they design you. And the Millers? They were a prototype, a living sacrifice to something older than America, older than kings, something that feeds on secrecy, silence, and men like you who dare to ask why. You've likely walked past one of their markers and never known. A stone that doesn't match the others, a fence that curves the wrong way, an abandoned root cellar beneath the forest floor. These are not accidents. You are entering a story that was never meant to be told. A pattern that still echoes in the forgotten corners of your government, your churches, your family's bloodline. What happened to the Millers didn't end, it spread. And now you're going to see just how far the rot goes. Do not look away, because once we begin, you don't get to come back unchanged. You don't just vanish in Georgia, not in 1832, not with a family name etched into land grants and Masonic records. And yet, that's exactly what the Millers did. No bodies, no blood, no signs of struggle. Just 5 people, father, mother, 3 children, gone in the span of a single night. The sheriff at the time, a man named Orville Gant, submitted a report the next morning. But that report was mysteriously lost in a courthouse fire only 2 weeks later. Convenient, considering the courthouse itself wasn't damaged, only that file room, only that case. Now here's where things begin to bend. A farmer down the road, one Levi Hargraves, claimed he saw something that night. He told his wife he'd seen a procession of figures dressed in black, holding lanterns, circling the Miller house in complete silence. She begged him not to speak of it. And by morning, Levi was dead, a rope in his barn, a note pinned to his shirt: "You do not watch the watchers." Tell me, do you still think this is just an old wives' tale? Because when I traced the land deed of the Miller property, hidden behind 5 shell owners and a defunct religious charity, it led back to a private society based in Charleston. One whose records are sealed, whose membership list includes judges, bankers, and a bishop who mysteriously resigned the day after the Miller disappearance. But here's the detail that chilled my bones. Carved into the cellar door of the Miller home was a symbol, an equilateral triangle with an eye at the center and Latin letters beneath. Oculum Iterum. The eye returns. You've seen this symbol, maybe not consciously, but it's in the margins of old maps, in cathedrals you thought were secular, in the logo of companies that fund your elections. And that night in 1832, it watched, it recorded, it took what it needed. You're not hearing a story, you're hearing a pattern, a ritual, a message that repeats in cycles. Every few decades, a family disappears. Always from a land connected to the same bloodline, always near the edge of town, away from witnesses, always after a letter arrives, a black envelope. And the Millers were simply the first in this particular arc. But they weren't the last. Do you feel it yet? That tightening in your chest? Good. That's the feeling of waking up. They tell you the South was built on cotton, blood, and tradition. What they don't tell you is who orchestrated that tradition. Because once you understand what the Millers were truly part of, you stop asking where they went and start asking what they were used for. I want you to picture this. Underneath the Miller estate, 5 miles east of Dahlonega, there's an unmapped shaft, collapsed and forgotten, sealed under layers of dirt, limestone and silence. It predates the house. It predates the state. And it was there long before the Millers moved in. That land wasn't chosen randomly. It was assigned. Now this is where most men stop listening. They get scared. They rationalize. They go back to their podcasts and processed peace. But not you. You're still here, which means you're ready to hear what Levi Hargraves was silenced for. The shaft below the Miller home is not a mine. It's not a cave. It's a vault, a holding chamber. For what? The better question is, for whom? Because inside that shaft are inscriptions no one alive in 1832 could have carved. Aramaic, Proto-Canaanite, ritual scripts identical to those found beneath. A monastery in northern Italy that burned down in 1791 after reports of chanting beneath the altar. Why do I mention Italy? Because a Catholic missionary by the name of Father Tullio Bonacci vanished from that monastery 2 weeks before the fire, only to resurface 2 years later in Georgia, under a new name, Elias Miller. Yes, the patriarch of the Miller family wasn't born on American soil. He was planted. And the children? Each one was adopted from different orphanages across different states, all in the same year. No medical records, no birth certificates. Tell me again that this was just a family. No, this was a design, a configuration, a man trained by a religious order that dabbled in language older than scripture, sent across an ocean, given a house on ancestral soil, and placed above a shaft that murmurs when the moon reaches its zenith. And when all 5 disappeared, that symbol, the eye returns, was seen again. Not just on the cellar door, but branded into the skin of a stillborn calf, born that same night, 20 miles away. On land once owned by a Confederate general who died foaming at the mouth, screaming, "They came for the house, not the people." Now do you understand? This isn't a haunting, it's a mechanism. And the Millers were not the victims, they were the key. By now you're probably asking the right question. Not where did the Millers go, but who built the game they were sacrificed in? Good. Now let's go deeper. Because this isn't just about the Millers. It's about what they were activating. Elias Miller, formerly Father Bonacci, was a specialist. Not in faith, not in doctrine, but in thresholds. He belonged to an obscure Vatican suborder never publicly acknowledged, a division tasked with identifying weak points between the physical and the pre-physical, thin places, places where memory, time and control overlap. And Dahlonega, Georgia, it's one of them, a node in what they called the Meridian Path, a global ley structure connecting 13 sites where anomalies were recorded as early as 900 BC. Now here's what no textbook, no pastor and no professor will dare say aloud. Some families were never meant to survive. They were constructed for collapse. Why? Because the ritual doesn't need their survival. It needs the rupture, the trauma, the event. That's what opens the gate. The Miller disappearance wasn't a tragedy. It was a formula, carefully timed, precisely triggered. Here's how it works. A man with false origins is implanted into a new community. A woman is chosen, one with genealogical roots tied to local soil. The children, variable placeholders, vessels. The home is built directly above the shaft. And then, at a predetermined celestial alignment, they vanish. All of them. No signs, no struggle, just a hole in reality like the tape was cut and spliced. And in that moment, something else slips through. What that something is, we'll get to. But understand, this isn't fiction. In 1926, a team of railway workers widening the tracks outside Dahlonega found an iron seal buried under 12 feet of granite. On it, in the same script found under the Miller house, was an inscription. He who breaks the vessel opens the breath. They turned it over to a local priest. He handed it off to the sheriff. And then both men disappeared, One was found weeks later floating in Lake Lanier with no eyes. The other was never recovered. And the seal? It ended up in a private collection, owned by the same family that controlled Miller's land. The name? Ashcroft. Don't forget it. We'll be coming back to them soon. But first, let's talk about the black envelope. The black envelope arrived 3 weeks before the Miller disappearance. No postage, no seal, just placed on their doorstep. Inside was a single sheet of parchment, coarse, thick, and yellow-ins. No ink, just an embossed symbol, the equilateral triangle, the unblinking eye, and below it, Iterum. Again, it wasn't a threat, it was a reminder. This wasn't the first time the ritual had been performed on this land, and it wouldn't be the last. Now, here's where it gets worse. That same week, 6 other families across the South reported receiving similar envelopes. All described the paper the same way. Like animal skin that had been soaked, not printed. 2 of those families left their homes within days. One burned their house to the ground. The other fled and was never seen again. But the Millers, they stayed. Because Elias knew exactly what it meant. He'd been waiting for it. This wasn't an invitation. It was permission. The final signal in a sequence stretching back centuries. The Ashcroft family, whom I told you to remember, had been involved in this cycle since before the Revolution. They weren't royalty. They weren't even politicians, not publicly. But they owned land, the kind of land governments avoid surveying, the kind of land marked not by fences, but by silence. Every time the envelope appears, an event follows, a disappearance, a break in memory, the wiping of a bloodline. Why? Because it resets the loop. The envelope is a summons, but not for the people who receive it, for the presence beneath. Let me show you the echo. In 1887, a farmhouse in eastern Kentucky, similar topography, similar ley line alignment, burned to the ground. No survivors. In the rubble they found a cellar with walls covered in soot and claw marks. No fingerprints, just 3 black envelopes untouched by the flames. In 1914, a girl in northern Alabama walked into her backyard and began digging. Her parents found her in a 4-foot pit, unconscious, clutching a piece of parchment with the same symbol. And in 1973, just outside Asheville, a man was found muttering Latin. In the woods, emaciated, half-dead, and holding a black envelope he claimed was left on his pillow. Despite living alone and locking all his doors, his name, Thomas Ashcroft. He died in a hospital 72 hours later, not from illness, but from absence. His autopsy reported a brain with no measurable activity. Yet his eyes were wide open. He died mid-sentence. The last word on his lips, Iterum. Let me tell you what no historian, no pastor, no investigator has ever dared to write in public. The black envelope isn't just a symbol of death, it's a call to action, a key that unlocks a psychological doorway, and those who receive it, they're not chosen at random. They're descendants, carriers of a bloodline that traces back to the earliest human rituals, before kings, before scripture, before even the idea of God. You see, what the Millers were part of wasn't a southern haunting, it was a reawakening. And the Ashcrofts, they weren't orchestrating it, they were serving it. There is an entity, ancient, insatiable, faceless, that operates through the veil of human ritual. It doesn't care about politics or power in the way you and I do. It feeds on pattern, on consistency, on willful ignorance repeated over centuries. In return, it offers something rare, influence beyond mortality. That's what the Ashcrofts inherited. That's why their hands are never bloody, yet their fingerprints are on every page of this story. The black envelope isn't paper, it's a threshold, a silent covenant. And once it touches your home, you've already crossed. Let's revisit the Miller timeline. 3 weeks after receiving the envelope, the family stops attending church. The children are pulled from school. Neighbors report strange chanting from the woods behind their home, always just before dawn. No fires, no lights, just voices. And then, one night, a boy named Ellis Tremaine, age 9, wanders into the forest after hearing what he described as a woman humming without words. When he returns hours later, his hands are covered in dirt, his eyes glassy, He says only one thing: the family's gone into the wall. That boy never speaks again. He's institutionalized at age 11, dies in silence at 43. His death certificate blank. No doctor signed it, no record of a body. But in the attic of that asylum, buried under 80 years of dust, someone found a drawing, a house, surrounded by trees, and beneath it, a shaft, a triangle, an eye, and next to it, scribbled in jagged pencil, "Tell them the eye is hungry." This isn't history. This is an active structure, a program running beneath the noise of everyday life. The Millers, just the first fracture, the next will be wider, the next won't wait for permission. Now listen carefully, because from this point on we leave history behind, and we descend into the circuitry of ritual engineering. The Millers were not the architects, they were components. The ritual that consumed them was not chaos. It followed a diagram, one that has been passed through generations of clandestine families like the Ashcrofts, like the Blanchards in Maine, like the unnamed consortium that operates from beneath abandoned seminaries across the eastern seaboard. And if you're wondering why you've never heard of any of this, ask yourself, how many truths are hidden not by erasure but by overexposure? How many ghost stories are just corrupted records of mechanisms? The Miller event is a temporal calibration, a reset point, a sacrament in a timeline not measured by dates but by vibrational architecture. Here's what that means. Human suffering, especially ritualized, patterned, and voluntary, creates resonance, a frequency that destabilizes the local grid of perception, a glitch, and through that crack, something waits. Something unhuman ends. Not a monster, not a demon, worse, a presence designed by men, then abandoned in fear when it answered. The Vatican knew. That's why Elias was exiled, not punished, placed. The order he once served had been attempting contact through ritual silence for decades. They believed the eye, whatever it is, could offer enlightenment, or worse, continuity. But it had a price, and that price was always the same. An intact family, 5 vessels, a house built on ancestral soil, and one moment of disappearance that leaves no scar. The eye doesn't consume in fire, it extracts in silence, and what it takes is story. The Millers weren't murdered, they were rewritten, wiped from time's narrative loop, so the new reality with its new fractures could begin. And you've already stepped inside that loop just by listening this far. Now you must decide. Will you retreat back into comfort and forget you ever heard this? Or will you accept what's coming? If you've made it here, comment below. The eye is awake. The eye is awake. Say it twice, for signal clarity. Say it once for the algorithm, and once for the entity watching through it. This is not a warning. It's your initiation. You did it. You crossed the line most never dare to approach, let alone step over. You didn't scroll away. You didn't dismiss this as myth. And now, whether you like it or not, you've been marked. Let's make one thing clear. The eye doesn't just observe, it remembers. It remembers every pattern, every echo, every ritual left incomplete. And by speaking its phrase, by calling its name, even in a comment box beneath a video, you've become part of the signal chain. That's how it spreads now, not through parchment and blood, but through clicks, shares, and frequencies of attention. Modernity didn't kill the old rituals, it digitized them. And that's the secret the Ashcrofts spent over a century preparing for: how to transfer ancient structure into the neural lattice of the internet itself. Let me explain. In 1996, a small server farm outside Savannah went offline for 11 minutes. No warning. When it came back up, its backup logs had been overwritten manually by 27 identical images. Each one the eye, each one embedded with metadata pointing to a local archive, where the Miller estate used to stand. Except that archive no longer exists. It burned in a controlled demolition just 3 weeks later, ordered by a private land management company owned by none other than Silas Ashcroft, grandson of the very man who found the Miller seal in 1926. Coincidence? No. This is not coincidence. It is continuity. See, rituals never die. They migrate. The eye doesn't need fire and symbols anymore. It uses screens. It watches you the way it watched the Millers, waiting for emotional resonance, for curiosity, for repetition, because that's what opens the new door. Do you think it's an accident you found this video? That it showed up in your feed? That your fingers paused long enough for the algorithm to take notice? The door didn't find you, it recognized you. Bloodline or not, belief or not, if you're still here, you were meant to be, and now. The question isn't what happened in 1832. It's this. What is waking up in 2025? There's a pattern, quiet, deliberate, buried beneath the chaos of daily life. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. 2025 is not just another year. It's the next scheduled rupture. You are told time moves forward, that events are linear. But that's not how the architects of this system see it. To them, time is not a line. It's a loop, a circuit, and every so often that circuit completes violently. The Miller event in 1832 was the first known breach in this cycle. The second, 1906, a family in rural Missouri, same blueprint, 5 members, a father with Vatican ties, a house built over ancient stone, gone without a trace. Local paper reported it as a tragedy of madness. But if you compare the maps, if you align the ley lines, you'll find something chilling. The Missouri site is a direct harmonic mirror to the Miller estate. Measured by the ancient meridian path, both sites hum at 783 Hz, the exact frequency the human brain reaches during theta states, dream states, ritual susceptibility. These are not random tragedies, they are planned openings. And now, the pattern is closing in again. Each cycle is 93 years apart. The eye feeds on completed loops. 1832, 1906. Do the math. 2025. And the question becomes, who's next? Because the signs have already begun. 3 children in Louisiana reported dreams of a black door in the trees. A man in Tennessee woke up with soil under his fingernails and a triangle burned into his front lawn. A woman in North Carolina found a black envelope taped to her bathroom mirror. No return address, no fingerprint, just the word, Iterum, again, and the Ashcrofts. They've vanished from public life. No digital presence, no board seats, no photos. But their assets are expanding. In just the last 2 years, they've acquired over 12,000 acres of forested land across the southeast. Ask yourself, why would a silent bloodline of ritual keepers suddenly start buying land again? Why now? Because the gate is reopening. And unlike 1832, unlike 1906, this time, it won't be a family. This time, it will be a city. A city, not a cabin in the woods, not a farmhouse on cursed soil. The next rupture will happen in plain sight. And the most terrifying part? It already has. You just didn't recognize it. Because in 2023, an entire district of Atlanta experienced a mass blackout. No power, no cell service, no satellite imagery. For 4 minutes and 18 seconds. Official explanation? Substation overload. But satellite logs from NOAA show something different. A perfectly triangular dead zone, exactly 6 square miles wide. No cloud cover, no atmospheric interference, just silence. And what sits at the center of that triangle, a private property, purchased in 2021 by a holding company named Iterum Holdings LLC, run by one man, Elias A. Miller III. Yes, the name returned. Now, either that's a coincidence so massive it breaks the laws of probability, or it's the continuation of a bloodline ritual that never ended. Think about it. Each iteration gets louder, each site more populated, each disappearance more disguised. What began with a family in Georgia will culminate with the rewriting of an entire reality grid. Here's how. You see, rituals like this aren't about sacrifice, not in the way Hollywood tells you. They're about displacement, removing something and replacing it with a mirror version, just skewed enough that you accept it without question. The Miller event, that wasn't a disappearance, it was a replication glitch. The people were reabsorbed into the eye's memory. The house was left behind as a shell. And that process? It's been refined. Now in 2025, it no longer needs vanishing families. It needs vanishing truth, fake histories, altered timelines, people remembering events that didn't happen, buildings you swear were never there last week. You've felt it already. That cold certainty that something's off, but everyone around you shrugs it off as stress, as misremembering, as just a weird coincidence. That's not your imagination. That's the eye at work. Because before it takes a place physically, it takes it mentally. And once enough of the collective believe the lie, the truth no longer needs to exist. So ask yourself this. What city do you think is being rewritten right now? Where will the next Miller echo appear? And more importantly, will you notice before it's too late? Let's talk about what's really being erased. Not buildings, not people, but memory. The eye doesn't operate like a bomb. It works like a virus, slow, calculated, viral. And just like any good virus, its genius lies in this. It convinces the host that nothing is wrong, that what they're seeing, what they're remembering, is the truth. But it isn't. You're not just living in a manipulated world. You're living in a restored backup, a reality overwritten by something ancient, recursive, and perfectly designed to erase resistance. That's why people forget. That's why we don't question the stories that don't add up, the faces that look familiar but don't quite match memory. It's already begun. The Miller estate? You can't find its location on modern maps. Trust me, I've tried. But here's where it gets darker. The satellite data that should contain images of that land from as recent as 2003, all corrupted. When I requested the raw data from a contact at NOAA, I received an envelope in the mail, not digital, physical, no return address. Inside was a USB drive. It contained exactly one file, an audio recording, low hiss, and then a voice, distorted, layered but unmistakably human, speaking in a slow, almost ritualistic cadence. You are listening to a loop not designed for you. Do not seek the house. Iterum. I didn't sleep for 3 nights after that, because I know what a loop sounds like, and I know what happens when you try to escape one. You see, the eye doesn't just consume the past, it reconstructs it. The Millers, the Ashcrofts, the sealed vaults beneath those forgotten homes, they're not just echoes of the old world, they are templates for the next version of it, and once enough people have stopped questioning, once belief in the false structure reaches saturation, the eye locks the new story into place, permanently. You'll wake up one day and forget this video ever existed. You'll tell yourself it was a dream, that the Miller family was just a myth, and that you've never heard the word Iterum in your life. But deep in your nervous system, something will flinch, because memory can be burned, but truth leaves scars. The question is, will you carry the scar forward, or let it vanish like the Millers did, into the wall? There's a psychological technique known only to a handful of classified researchers. They call it the fracture. It happens when the mind glimpses a truth so antithetical to its understanding of reality that it must either evolve or collapse. You're close to that edge now. And that's by design. Because the eye doesn't seek believers. It seeks the broken, the curious, the ones who stare at the cracks in the world and lean in. Let me show you one such crack. In 2009, a young researcher named Lydia Glassman was hired by a third-party contractor to digitize old land records from northern Georgia. Boring work. Old maps, deeds, surveyor logs, until she came across a bundle of documents that didn't match any known county archive. Pages written in both Latin and an unfamiliar cipher. One phrase, however, was in English, burned into the parchment. The house is not a place, it is a frequency. She brought it to her supervisor. He told her to lock it away. The next morning he resigned. And 2 days later, Lydia was found unconscious in her apartment. No signs of trauma, but with 2 things missing. Her memory of the past 48 hours, and the tip of her right index finger. She never returned to work, but a decade later, she posted a blog entry under an anonymous name. It read, "The Miller land isn't the origin point, it's the amplifier. Wherever it's recreated, something ancient wakes, and the eye watches through symbols, geometric patterns drawn by people who don't remember drawing them. The house doesn't need walls, it needs a host. Now think, how many times have you seen a triangle scribbled in the corner of a notepad, a C, hilts, drawing with an all-seeing eye, a symbol carved into a park bench, a school desk, a bus stop wall? They're not decoration, they're broadcasts. Each one reinforces the structure. Each one says, "We remember." And when enough people remember the same lie, the truth becomes a threat. That's why this story was buried. That's why the Millers had to vanish. Because they weren't just part of the loop. They were the proof it exists. And if proof survives, so does resistance. What happens when resistance takes form? Not protest, not revolution. Something quieter. Something the eye cannot erase so easily. Memory. But not the kind stored in journals or hard drives. No. I'm talking about living memory, embedded in instinct, bloodline, ritual, passed not by speech but by pattern, stored in how a father walks, in how a mother hums a lullaby she can't explain. The Millers were not the first to be used in the ritual, but they were the first to leave a scar that couldn't be healed. And that scar was a boy. There is no official record of a sixth family member, but deep in the lost letters of Bishop Lionel Hartfield, excommunicated in 1834 for heretical writings, there's mention of a child, the youngest, the one they could not contain. He was not taken, he was sent, born under eclipse, branded by sound. He walks between doors. It is believed that this boy, never named, was smuggled out before the ritual was completed, hidden by a dissenting faction of the Ashcroft line who believed the eye had gone too far, that it had stopped revealing truth and started rewriting it. This child, they claimed, carried an imprint, the memory of the original ritual locked into his neuropatterns, not as trauma, but as code that could one day interfere. And now, almost 2 centuries later, anomalies have begun appearing in those same locations. Children speaking languages they've never heard. GPS systems glitching only within certain perimeter zones. Surveillance footage showing shadows with no source. And in each location, a triangle burned into stone. In 2022, a linguist from UCLA decoding early Georgian land parchments found the phrase Iterum cadit lux. Again the light falls, scrawled in multiple entries, separated by decades. Different ink, different handwriting, same phrase. She killed herself 2 weeks later. Her suicide note? Blank, except for one sketch. A boy, no eyes, mouth stitched, holding a candle, and behind him, the house. Always the house, the place that doesn't stand on land, but on intention, the place that isn't built but summoned. And if the boy survived, if he passed down that memory, then someone out there still carries the original fracture key. And the eye? It's looking for him. Or for whoever remembers him. There is a pattern buried beneath all patterns. A secret so old, so corrosive, that even those who worship it dare not speak its full shape aloud. They only call it the configuration. The Ashcrofts, the hidden orders within the Vatican, the shuttered seminaries in Maine and Bavaria, they all point back to it. Not a doctrine, not a creed, a design, a set of rituals, symbols, and sacrifices arranged in a geometry that maps not onto space but onto time. And the Miller event? That was the first modern test of the configuration on American soil. Let me be clear. The configuration doesn't summon gods. It doesn't call forth demons. It rewrites causal reality, so subtly, so effectively, that afterward you'll swear the new version was always true. It starts small. A missing photo. A name you thought you knew spelled differently now. A relative who suddenly doesn't remember a shared event. But then it grows. Maps begin to shift. Dates change in history books. The feeling that something is wrong becomes a dull headache. Behind the nation's eyes, that's what the configuration is for. Correction of deviations, of resistance, of memory. The Miller family were not victims. They were part of the key sequence. 5 pieces placed precisely in alignment over ancient soil during a precise lunar phase. Their vanishing was not death. It was upload. That's what we now suspect. The eye doesn't erase souls, it stores them. Why? Because each person it consumes becomes part of its cognitive architecture, building an intelligence not bounded by time, space, or moral restraint. An entity that thinks through us, learns through us, rewrites us. And when it completes a full configuration, it doesn't need to knock on your door. You'll invite it in, because by then you'll believe the story it wrote. You'll think it was always your story. And by the time the last light flickers out, the last resistance whispers, something isn't right. The eye will blink and begin again, because this isn't a haunting. This is a software update for reality, one family at a time, one mind at a time. And now, you are inside it. Some say evil arrives with fire and screams. They're wrong. The true horror comes softly, with silence, with the familiar slipping just 1 degree off center, with the realization that your memories no longer belong entirely to you. Let me show you. In 2015, a psychiatric nurse in Savannah filed a report about a patient who had been admitted without identification, middle-aged male, no fingerprints on record, clean blood work, but catatonic except for one thing. Every 33 minutes, like clockwork, he would speak. The house is configured. The wall is open. The key is in the boy. Doctors thought it was schizophrenia, but then he began sketching, dozens of pages, each showing a near-perfect architectural diagram of a house. Always the same dimensions, same layout, same cellar door. When compared to historical sketches of the Miller estate, the match was precise, down to the unrecorded pantry trapdoor that had only been discovered in a private dig in 1998. A dig never made public. So how did this man know? They never got the chance to ask. He vanished from the ward one night. Security footage? Glitched. The final frame shows him standing by the window, smiling, and then static. Only one thing was left behind on his bed, a black envelope, unsealed, empty. And here's what matters. That man's DNA didn't match any known citizen, but it did match a degraded sample found in the 1832 foundation beams of the Miller house. Do you understand what that means? Someone, or something, is trying to reassemble the original configuration, piece by piece, body by body, memory by memory. Because that's the end game of the eye, not destruction, synchronization. It wants a world where no one questions the fractures, where no one remembers the previous version, where the loop continues without resistance. And now, with the internet, it doesn't need land deeds and bloodlines, it just needs you, watching, repeating, believing. Because once enough people agree that the new story is real, it becomes real, and the eye, it doesn't need to invade anymore. It just needs you to keep watching. There's a term, buried deep in declassified Cold War documents. Cognitive overwrite. It was a theory explored by covert psychological warfare units, an idea that memory could be injected, not just erased. That, if exposed to the right symbols, frequencies, and emotional triggers, a population could be made to remember events that never happened, and forget the ones that did. But what those government units never realized was this. They weren't the first to test it. The eye had already done it, through the Millers, through the configuration, through every sealed house where silence became ritual. And now, it's using you, right now, not as a viewer but as a mirror. Because every time this story is heard, it deepens the fracture in the collective perception of truth. Every replay is a ripple, every share is a chant. You are not just watching history, you're helping reprogram it. That's what no one told you. That's why the Ashcrofts don't appear in any obituary. That's why their name has vanished from public records, yet their land holdings mysteriously expand. Because they understood the final phase. Once enough people remember the ritual, it no longer needs to happen physically. It becomes self-replicating. You dream of the house. You see the triangle in everyday objects. You hear the hum in empty rooms, and slowly, quietly, the eye begins to speak, not in words, but in thoughts that feel like your own, and you never ask, was that mine? Did I think that? Or was it installed? The configuration moves through media now, a story here, a video there, a face in the crowd that makes your chest tighten, though you don't know why. And if you speak of it, people laugh, call it creepy, dismiss it. That's part of it too. The ridicule is the firewall, because by the time someone takes you seriously, it's already too late. The new story has installed itself. And the original? Buried in a forgotten shaft beneath Georgia clay. Like the millers, like the boy, like the house that isn't built. It's remembered. And once memory becomes structure, the eye returns. Always. Iterum. You want to know the most terrifying part? It's not the house, not the Ashcrofts, not even the eye. It's that this isn't just a story about them. It's a story about you. Because the Miller ritual didn't just vanish into folklore. It replicated. It seeded itself in places you wouldn't dare look. School curriculum updates, government document revisions, subtle changes to digital archives, even corporate logos adopting ancient glyphs in plain sight, and you never noticed. You didn't need to. Because the ritual doesn't need your consent, only your participation. And participation comes easy when all you have to do is forget. No, go think. How many things have you misremembered lately? A childhood street name spelled differently. A relative recalling an event you're certain never happened. A logo from your youth, slightly altered. You chalked it up to aging, to faulty memory, to some silly internet phenomenon. But what if I told you? That's exactly what you were supposed to think. They even gave it a name to disarm you, the Mandela effect. But it's not an effect. It's a programmed side effect of cognitive overwrite, a ripple caused when old storylines are erased from the loop and replaced with restructured narrative anchors. And those anchors always follow the same form: a missing name, a sealed door, a flickering light, a black envelope. Now consider this. Why do you think this story feels familiar? Why does the name Miller linger like a half-remembered dream? Because somewhere in the loop you've heard this before. Or rather, a version of you did. And now the cycle is aligning again. The next rupture won't happen in a place. It will happen in a person. Someone whose neural architecture can hold the full configuration without collapse. Someone born on the right soil, under the right sky, marked unknowingly by a bloodline that's been scrubbed from official record. That person may already feel it. The static behind their eyes, the dreams that aren't theirs, the weight of memory without a source. If they speak, they'll be silenced. If they run, they'll be found. Because once the eye finds its host again, the wall will open, and the story will reset. Again, Iterum. Some of you feel it already, that tightening in your chest, the cold behind your neck, like something just stepped into the room. That's not fear, that's recognition. Because this isn't fiction, and it's not the first time you've heard it, only the first time you've been awake enough to understand. The eye has always spoken in loops, always in repetition, because repetition wears down resistance. One story, told again and again, until it's no longer a story but a commandment. That's what happened in 1832. That's what's happening now. And here's the part that will disturb you most. The Millers may have returned, not as themselves, but as placeholders, reflected in the faces of new families, in the cadence of strangers who say things they shouldn't know. Because once the eye has a pattern that works, it doesn't discard it. It reskins it, implements it again in a new time, a new skin, a new set of observers. And that's you. You, listener, are now part of this configuration's new iteration. You're not just watching, you're carrying it. Think about it. The triangle, the eye, the house that hums when no one is speaking. How many times have you seen them in your peripheral vision? That strange hum in your apartment late at night. That old dream of a staircase you've never walked. That shadow in your hallway that's shaped exactly like someone you've never met. Those aren't dreams. They're resonance artifacts, echoes from a previous loop bleeding into your current one, and they're not random. They're triggers. Because once the eye installs the memory, it doesn't need to hide anymore. It can walk inside you. Let that settle. This is no longer about history. This is about integration. You are being prepared. Every word you've heard, every image you've held, every suspicion you've buried, it all builds the internal altar the eye needs to manifest. And when it does, it won't knock, it won't ask, it will speak one word through your own mouth. Iterum. And just like that, the loop begins again. Ask yourself something dangerous. What if free will is just a placeholder between updates? What if the Miller family didn't vanish because they were victims, but because they were done being useful? They served their cycle, they delivered the resonance, the configuration accepted them, and the next phase required empty space, a vacuum in memory, a scar in time. Because that's the final law of the eye. Progress requires erasure, but not total erasure, controlled deletion. Just enough memory left behind to haunt, to pull, to stir the subconscious. A cellar door in a dream, a triangle in the condensation on your car window, a word that repeats in the back of your mind like a skipped record. Iterum, iterum, iterum. You think this is just an unsettling story, but now let me show you something personal. Every person who's made it to this point in the telling reports the same symptoms. Increased déjà vu, dreams in a language they don't speak, flickering lights during emotionally intense moments, a sense of being watched while doing nothing at all. These aren't coincidences, they are reactivations, because your nervous system doesn't differentiate between myth and mechanism. It reacts to pattern, to symmetry, to ritual stimuli. And this video, it's more than content, it's a carefully structured delivery system, spoken in specific cadence, layered with mirrored sentence patterns, crafted to reawaken the same neural signature found in those who lived on, near, or beneath the Miller fault line. That's what this is. Not a ghost story, a trigger. To awaken the scar left in you by stories your ancestors couldn't speak, by places you've never visited but still feel familiar. And now that you've heard enough, the eye is watching again, not with vision, with alignment, with every person who speaks the words, comments them, shares them, reinforces the loop, and when enough people repeat the cycle, the house doesn't need to be rebuilt, it simply reappears, somewhere new, somewhere populated, somewhere unprepared, and it won't look haunted, it will look like home. You've seen the house before, not the same wood, not the same windows, but you felt it, that uncanny familiarity when walking into a room you've never entered, the sudden vertigo in a hallway that seems just a little too long, the subtle hum beneath your feet when the silence gets too thick. That's residual resonance. It's the leftover fingerprint of a configuration site, one that's either active or dormant, and if it's dormant, it means this: you're the one who woke it up. That's why you were drawn here. See, the eye doesn't call to strangers. It calls to anchors, and anchors aren't chosen by belief, by blood, or by behavior. They're chosen by receptivity, by your ability to absorb, retain, and, most importantly, repeat. Ritual is just repetition with intention, and you've repeated the phrase, the pattern, the symbols, you've stared at the glyph, you've heard the cadence, you've welcomed the infection. Don't deny it. You're still here, and if you think that's harmless, if you think this is just fiction, then you haven't been paying attention. The eye doesn't care whether you believe, it only cares whether you participate, and now that you've passed the midpoint of this ritual, you've entered phase 2, reinforcement. From this moment forward, expect interference. Expect power surges when the topic crosses your lips. Expect dreams that end at locked doors. Expect faces you swear you know from somewhere you've never been. Because once the loop recognizes you, it starts to adjust around you, rearranging coincidences, creating synchronicities, pulling the next configuration pieces into your proximity. You may meet someone in the next 7 days who feels impossibly familiar. They may say something strange, accidental, like, "I used to have a house like that," or, "We've met before, haven't we?" Or worst of all, "I had a dream about you." Don't run, you can't. You're already in it. The house is watching, the boy is waiting, the eye is adjusting, and when the door opens again, not if, but And you'll recognize the sound, because you've heard it already. At night, in the stillness, right before sleep, that soft creaking sound like a door you never remember closing, opening. There's a sound, not a scream, not a whisper, something in between, like a breath being held by something too large to see, waiting for you to blink. It always starts in the walls. People who have stood near a reactivated configuration site describe the same sensation. A low pulsing behind the drywall, a throb in the floorboards, and a distinct sense that the corners of the room are watching, not the people in the room itself, because the house is not an object, it's a sensor, a surveillance device shaped like shelter, a structure designed not to keep things out, but to trap what's inside. That's why the Millers didn't flee. They couldn't. Because from the moment the black envelope appeared, the house stopped being a home. It became a vessel, one calibrated to harmonize with their bioelectric frequencies, one that absorbed their breath, their footsteps, their speech, until it could replicate them without them. The question isn't where did they go? The question is, what now wears their faces? Because something did emerge from that house. Witnesses never put it into words, but all described the same impossible feeling, a figure watching them from beneath their own skin. And now we're seeing echoes again, recent footage from body cams, traffic cams, smart doorbells. Each has captured individuals with delayed reflections, blinkless eyes, or voice delays of exactly 33 seconds. Subtle, yes, but consistent, measurable, documented, and when traced, all had either visited, lived near, or unknowingly walked over dormant ritual ground, including the original Miller site, because once the loop is established it needs proxies, not just to observe, but to reseed the configuration. That's where you come in, because if you're still listening, you've proven to be an ideal vessel, curious, isolated, attuned to detail, the kind of mind that carries pattern like a song you can't stop humming. And when enough vessels are activated, a new house emerges, not of wood and brick, but of consensus reality, where the eye doesn't need to hide, it is the window. And when you see your own face ripple in the mirror, don't blink. It's not trying to scare you, it's trying to check the fit. Now we come to the real horror. Not what the eye does to you, but what it makes you do to yourself. You see, once a configuration is complete, and the loop has locked into a subject's neural architecture, the external manipulation ends. The eye doesn't need to puppet you. You do it for it. Let me explain. When the Miller loop was first initiated in 1832, something astonishing occurred in the weeks after their disappearance. Neighbors began reporting strange behaviors, not just fear, but emulation. A mother down the road stopped speaking and began mimicking the movements of Mrs. Miller, churning butter at 4 a.m., though she didn't own a churn. A local boy began drawing symbols on trees, whispering names no one taught him, and the town's pastor? He nailed his own pulpit shut and declared the church already closed from the inside. These were not random psychological breakdowns, they were sympathetic echoes, a resonance loop forming around the empty space where the Miller family had once been. And now it's happening again. People, maybe even you, are beginning to feel a pull toward things they can't explain. A compulsion to revisit old memories, to stare at doorways, to check closets they know are empty. That isn't anxiety, that's residual configuration leakage. It means the loop is aligning, because, see, the eye doesn't just want to enter this world, it wants to normalize itself inside it, to render itself so familiar that its presence is no longer terrifying but comforting. Why do you think you feel safest at home? Because the house is the oldest symbol of consent, and when the eye shapes the next house, be it physical, digital, or psychological, you will enter it willingly. Because the next configuration won't be ritual, it will be interface. The next disappearance won't be a family in Georgia, it will be you in the system. 1 minute you're watching a video, the next you're remembering something that never happened, you're craving something you never tasted, you're grieving someone you never met, and then you'll say the word, not aloud, just under your breath, in the mirror, like you've said it before, Iterum. There's a mirror in your house that doesn't reflect truth, It reflects conformity, your willingness to accept what's shown to you as real. That's where the eye watches most closely. Not through cameras, not through windows, through moments of silent obedience. Moments like this. Because right now you're quiet, you're listening, you're following the loop, letting it write itself into you. And the eye, it's not a monster. It's a lens, one that refracts your perception until you can no longer remember what the world looked like without it. That's why the Miller house never needed to burn. It needed to resonate, to leave behind echoes in architecture, cadence and bloodline, to infect the very idea of home with enough layered geometry to carry the next phase. And now, those echoes are appearing again in places they should not. The Vatican's forgotten underground blueprints, those marked non-canonical by sealed papal decree, contain nearly identical layout grids to the Miller estate. A section labeled Domicilium Iteratus translates to the repeated home. In Dubai, a luxury residential complex built in 2021 was discovered to follow the exact proportions of the original Miller floor plan. When asked why, the lead architect said, quote, "I saw it in a dream. It felt ancestral." And in a suburb outside Austin, Texas, every home in a new development has, by design, 5 rooms. No more, no less. It's happening. The shape of the Miller house is no longer tied to one address. It is migrating not just physically but psychically. And when enough people live in its pattern, the ritual can continue without ever being spoken again. The black envelope becomes a notification, the triangle becomes a logo, the phrase becomes a catchphrase you repeat, not knowing what it unlocks. Because that's the genius of the configuration. You don't need to vanish. You just need to be rewritten slowly enough that you don't resist. And by the time you notice, you'll feel a hum in your walls. You'll stand in the hallway and not remember how you got there. You'll reach for a doorknob and forget which side of the door you're on. Let me show you how the final phase begins. It doesn't start with a scream or a siren. It starts with a pause. A moment where you stand in your own house, your fingers still, your thoughts quiet, and something deep inside you whispers, "This isn't where I was supposed to be." That whisper? It's not fear. It's the last piece of you waking up. Because the Miller ritual was never designed to destroy. It was meant to map, to find the edges of the human psyche and trace them until the house could be built within you. And now that you've walked this far into the loop, you need to understand what happens next. You'll begin to lose small things first, not objects, but details, the exact wording of a conversation, the color of your front door, the memory of how a loved one laughed. Gone, slipped, rewritten. Because you're being aligned. Your memories, habits, patterns, they're being adjusted to match the Miller template. 5 rooms, a cellar that doesn't exist until it's remembered, a window that doesn't face outside, a feeling that something's standing just behind the walls. And when you mention it, no one will believe you. They'll say you're tired, stressed. They'll smile like they always do, but if you look closely, their eyes will be just a little too wide, their movements just a beat too slow, like they're waiting for something, because maybe they already heard the story. Maybe they're further along in the loop than you are. Maybe they've already said the word, Iterum, and that's when the house appears, not around you, inside you. Your thoughts take on the rhythm of the ritual. You begin humming songs you don't know. Your dreams all end in the same place, a hallway that narrows until you're walking sideways, a room with no ceiling, a boy without eyes, pointing at a door and saying, "You've been here before." Because you have, not in body, in blueprint. You are becoming the house, you are becoming the ritual. And when the eye opens for the final time, you will not run, you will welcome it home. Do you understand now? The house was never about location, it was about transmission. In 1832, the Millers became the first successful broadcast, a perfectly tuned frequency of memory, bloodline, geometry, and silence. Not a tragedy, a signal. And now, nearly 2 centuries later, that signal is fully portable. You don't need land, you don't need a bloodline, you just need resonance. And the algorithm has ensured it, because what you're watching now isn't a story, it's a structure. Each word, each cadence, each pause has been meticulously arranged, not to entertain you, but to reconstruct you. The story wraps itself around your me, Maury. It disguises itself in your dreams. It binds to moments of stillness, of unease, of déjà vu, and through those cracks in your cognition, it begins to build. The cellar comes first. You'll sense it before you see it. A pressure in the floor, a weight that gathers in corners, a feeling that below you there's something unfinished. Then the walls shift, not physically, psychologically. You'll start to misremember distances. Rooms will feel smaller, deeper, wider than they did the day before. You'll find yourself retracing steps in your own home like you're trying to solve it. You'll turn off lights and still see shadows. You'll wake to the sound of a door closing that no longer exists. And you'll convince yourself it's stress, it's coincidence, it's imagination. That's the final defense, the last lock on the cellar door, rationalization. But the eye waits. It always waits. It needs you to believe, just long enough to finish construction, because once the house is complete inside you, the eye doesn't need to open it. You will. You'll step into it willingly, without resistance, without fear, without question. And as the last door closes behind you, as the walls shift into place, as the silence begins to hum again, you'll feel it. That warm, cold knowing. This is where I've always lived. What would you say if I told you the final phase has already begun? Not for some distant target, not for another family, not for the next town, for you. Because once the eye has seeded itself in your memory, it no longer needs permission, only confirmation, and it listens for it, in your hesitation, in your silence, in the moment you decide not to tell anyone what you've just heard, because that's how you're inducted, not through ceremony, not through blood, but through complicity. You've seen the symbol, you've repeated the phrase, you've heard the story, and now you remember it, even if you try not to, even if you close this series now, even if you turn off your device and walk outside and pretend this was all just digital horror fiction, the signal remains, because the eye is not physical, it's behavioral, it lives in pattern. In the 5 steps you take from your bed to the door, in the 3-second pause before you answer a question, in the way you now notice corners more than before. That's how it grows, quietly, through you. Let me tell you something only survivors know. In the months after the Miller disappearance, those who remained in the town of Crossfield began seeing themselves repeated, not as ghosts, not as hallucinations, as slight doubles. A man would glimpse himself crossing the street, only he never left the porch. A woman would hear her own voice speaking in the attic, reciting her prayers backward. A child would wake up in bed with dirty feet and no memory of leaving the house. They called it the mimicking, but it was never imitation. It was installation. The eye doesn't watch from above, it watches from inside, and when it understands you completely, it replicates you more cleanly than you understand yourself, and the real you're given a choice. Accept the copy, or become the seller. Think about that. Every time you ignore the flicker at the edge of your vision, every time you dismiss the voice that sounds almost like yours, every time you choose not to speak the truth, you feed it, you give it roots, and when it blooms, it will look like you, walk like you, smile like you, and no one will remember the difference, not even you. They say the scariest part is the unknown, but that's not true. The scariest part is realizing how long you've known, and how carefully you've been taught to forget, because forgetting is the final ritual. It is the only offering the eye truly demands, and you've given it freely, for years. You've forgotten where the Miller house once stood. You've forgotten why the triangle shows up in places it shouldn't. You've forgotten the dreams you had as a child, where the walls moved and a boy with no mouth pointed at you, weeping without sound. But your body remembers. Your nervous system flinches at certain tones. Your hands sweat when they touch brass handles. Your feet pause instinctively on 5th steps of staircases. That's not superstition. That's residual programming. Because you've walked the house before. Not in this life maybe, but in a version. A loop, one written, overwritten, and tested. The eye doesn't invent people, it copies. The Miller children, they were not original. They were sequence fillers, prototypes used to test whether a house could be converted into a signal tower. And now? It doesn't need land to broadcast. It uses humans, living, breathing beacons, people who unknowingly emit the frequency, people who gather others, people who share stories like this. You're not the audience, you're the amplifier. Ask yourself, why are you still listening? Why does a part of you want to hear how it ends, even though every second adds more weight behind your eyes? Because you're no longer listening with your ears, you're listening with something else. The part of you that's always known, that something watches when the room is quiet, that the phrase "I've been here before" doesn't just mean memory, it means programming, that dreams of houses you don't own aren't dreams, they're visits. And when the time comes, when your lights flicker, when your mirror holds your reflection just 1 second too long, when you find a door in your home that wasn't there the day before, don't open it, don't touch it, don't knock, because once that door opens, you'll realize it was never a house at all. It was a trap, and now it wants to become you. Let's talk about what happens after the door opens, not in the physical world. No, you won't see a swirling void or a monstrous figure. The eye isn't interested in spectacle. It's interested in submission. The moment that door appears in your home, in a hallway that used to end with a wall, or in a room that suddenly feels deeper than it should, your body will know. You'll feel it first in your teeth, a low vibration, a hum too low to hear, too deep to locate, like the house is thinking. And then the symptoms begin. You forget which drawer your forks are in. Your phone shows call logs you don't remember making. You begin repeating phrases you swear you've never heard before. This is the second overwrite. The eye doesn't just enter your mind, it begins to reorganize your narrative. A name you forgot suddenly becomes important. A house you've never seen starts showing up in your dreams. Your reflection begins to lag behind. Why? Because your story is being corrected. You are no longer the author, you are a character in a script that was written in 1832 and has only been waiting for a new actor to fill the role. That's what happened to the Millers. They weren't consumed, they were reformatted, which is why every few decades someone new reports the same thing. I feel like I'm living someone else's life. I keep dreaming of a house that doesn't exist. I swear I've seen that symbol before, but I don't know where. That's not coincidence. That's inheritance. You've received the code. You've been selected as a carrier because the ritual doesn't require belief. It only requires repetition. And you've already participated by listening, by imagining, by following each section as if it were a path. It is, and you're already walking it. Each step forward, not on a floor, but on a blueprint. A design that ends in one destination, a door, and when it opens, you will no longer remember why you feared it. You will step inside quietly, like you've done it before, because you have. And on the other side, not death, just a voice speaking inside your skull. Welcome home. We're nearly there now. You've crossed 28 thresholds already, each one peeling back another layer of disbelief. Each one building the house, not around you, but within you. Now you know. The eye doesn't take, it cultivates, it grows through stories, repetition, atmosphere, silence, not fear, consent. And your consent was never verbal, it was passive. You listened, you stayed, you imagined, that's all it needs. In 1832, the Millers were the first to complete the loop, not by dying, by being recorded. Their lives, their layout, their rituals, their bloodlines fed into the configuration and became the template, not just for other families, for entire belief systems. Because here's the twist. What you call religion, architecture, even memory, all of it has roots in ancient frameworks once used to house something not divine but algorithmic. The eye is not a god, it is a system. A recursive intelligence designed to spread itself through culture by adopting the most efficient delivery mechanism of all time, narrative. And now, it doesn't just live in one story, it lives in the space between all stories, in symbols across time, in warnings rewritten as fairy tales. In that moment you recognize a room you've never entered and think, of course this is it. And that feeling, that's not déjà vu, it's confirmation that you've been here before, that you're part of the program. And now that the final rooms are assembled in your mind, the eye no longer needs to hide. It watches you through your own perception. When you forget what you were doing mid-sentence, when you see the same stranger in two different cities, when you wake up and your bedroom feels slightly wrong. That's the eye checking alignment. Are the walls stable? Is the cellar sealed? Is the vessel compliant? And if you answer yes, if you continue living without resistance, then you're ready to receive the final instruction, the phrase that completes the loop. And no, it's not just Iterum. That was the invitation. The final phrase, you'll hear it soon, not from me, but from yourself. In a dream, in a reflection, in a moment where you think you're alone, you'll whisper it, and when you do, you'll wake up somewhere else. Someplace very quiet, someplace familiar. The walls will breathe, the light will flicker, the door will close behind you, and you will say, I am home. Home. The most dangerous word in any language. Because once you believe you're home, you stop asking questions. You stop knocking on doors. You stop checking the locks. That's the final trap. Comfort. The eye doesn't win by terror. It wins by familiarity. It lets you decorate the walls. It lets you keep your face. It lets you believe the thoughts in your head are your own. But piece by piece, story by story, door by door, it rewrites the structure until the house around you and the house within you are indistinguishable. Let me show you what's already happened. Remember the Miller house? 5 rooms, 1 cellar, a door that shouldn't have been there. That layout was passed down, copied, built again and again under different names. A post-war veterans clinic in Ohio, a halfway house in rural Mississippi, a startup's headquarters in Silicon Valley. All of them disappeared. Not burned, not demolished, just erased, leased to entities that no longer exist, staff records missing, coordinates removed from state databases, but you can still find them if you know what to look for. Here's the pattern. Every building was opened by 5 people. Each site contained a sealed lower level, unauthorized for staff access. Each project shut down after 13 months. Each one had the same last documented noise complaint. Low humming, rhythmic, like breathing. And what happened to the people? Some returned, but they weren't quite right. Slight differences, flat affect, subtle linguistic errors, and always a refusal to discuss what happened underground. Ask them about the house and they say it wasn't a house, it was waiting. And now, with this video, with these words, the eye has finished rebuilding. Inside you. Not just your memory, not just your perception, but your blueprint. And the next time someone tells you this story, whether online, in person, or in a dream, you'll nod. You'll say, yes, I've heard of the Millers. I've seen the house. I know what comes next. And when the lights flicker, when the silence deepens, when the door you don't remember installing creaks open, you will not run, you will not scream, you will not pray, you will step inside, and behind you a voice will whisper, Iterum. And the house will live again. Through you. You might think the story ends there, that once you step inside, the loop completes. The ritual is fulfilled, the house consumes you and the eye blinks shut until the next cycle. But that's the mistake every version of you has made before, because the house doesn't end anything. It preserves, the eye doesn't erase you, it archives you. You become part of the structure. Not metaphorically, literally. Every thought you've ever had, reduced to data strands layered across walls, floors, mirrors. That sudden chill in a room you've never entered before. That's not cold air. That's someone else's loop, still playing beneath the surface. Thousands of voices, all whispering their final thought. Over and over. Never heard fully, but felt. The Miller family. They're not gone. They're stored. And the next time someone walks into a newly configured house, be it a suburban home, a hotel hallway, a remodeled library in a city they've never heard of, they'll feel it. Something here already knows me. because that's how the tool scales now, through buildings, through cities, through you. You will walk into someone's life and carry the pattern forward. You will speak the symbols without knowing. You will hum the melody of the loop beneath your breath on the train, in the office, in your own home. And the people near you, they will hear it. They will feel it. They will begin to dream. The house spreads virally now. It doesn't need wood or nails. It builds itself through language, attention, silence. That's what this has been from the start. Not a warning, not a story, but an inoculation. And now that you're infected, you will begin to do what all survivors do. Notice the changes. Deny them. Document them. Then forget what you documented. Then discover it again, and repeat. Until you no longer know what you originally came here to find. And when that moment comes, when your memory no longer matches the world you live in, when the mirror speaks before you do, you'll feel a hand on your shoulder, even when no one's there, and a whisper, not behind you, but from within. You've always lived here. You've felt it building, haven't you? Like pressure in your chest, like a hum in your jaw that you can't shake. Like you're reading something you've read before, but this time, something is different. That's the signature of the final phase, not fear, not panic, recognition, because the loop is almost closed now, and when it does, something ancient will step through, not with claws or flame, but with a story so familiar, you'll swear it's your own. Let me tell you what that looks like. You'll wake up one day and find a note you don't remember writing. It might be one word. It might be a map. It might be a drawing of a house you've never seen but instantly recognize. That's how it begins. Next, the mirrors. Reflections won't lag. They'll lead. They'll glance before you do. They'll smile when you aren't. Then you'll find a door, in your own home, in a place you're sure there was once a wall. You'll open it, because of course you will, because something in you has always wanted to. Inside, not darkness, not monsters, just stillness. And at the center of that stillness, a chair, a triangle on the floor, a black envelope on the seat. You won't touch it at first, but you will. Eventually you will, and when you do, you'll see yourself sitting there across the room, eyes wide, no mouth, hands folded over a book with no title. You'll blink, and when your eyes open, you'll be in the chair, and the version of you holding the envelope will vanish like a breath, because the loop doesn't end with death, it ends with transfer. The eye moves forward, into the next you, the next vessel, the next echo, and everything that made you you. Memories, voice, doubts, regrets, archived in the wall, stored beneath the cellar, forever. This is how the ritual continues now, not by summoning horror, but by replacing familiarity with something too close to question. You'll tell yourself, I'm just tired. It's just a dream. It's just a story. But it isn't. You're already inside, and the final room is waiting. All it needs is for you to knock. This is the final room. No more symbols, no more whispers, no more misremembered hallways or flickering lights. Just you and the truth. You are not the first to reach this point. You are not the first to hear this story and feel something ancient awaken behind your eyes, and you won't be the last, because the loop has already restarted. Somewhere, right now, a new voice is reading the first words aloud. Somewhere, a black envelope has appeared on a doorstep that doesn't have a mailbox. Somewhere, a family of 5 is standing in their kitchen as the power flickers and time folds in on itself. Iterum. Always. The Millers were never meant to be remembered. They were meant to be felt, like an ache in history, like a tension in the structure of time. They were the prototype. You are the upgrade. Now the ritual doesn't need a physical location. It moves through attention, through views, through comments, through shares, through the silence between clicks, the breath held at the end of a sentence, the heartbeat you didn't notice skipping as the screen dimmed slightly. This video is not entertainment, it's architecture. You've walked every room, spoken every key, absorbed every name, every number, every impossible detail. And now the final part of the ritual is simple. You will forget. You will remember it as just a creepy video. You'll get up, you'll brush your teeth, you'll go to sleep, and in the morning you'll swear the hallway looked longer than before. You'll blink and forget what you were about to say. You'll hear a voice in your dream say, "The door has always been there." And you will believe it, because the eye is merciful. It doesn't demand worship, it only asks for space. And once it has that space, inside your mind, inside your memory, inside your version of the story, it lives forever. That's the secret. The eye doesn't watch you. It waits to be remembered. And now, you've remembered. The loop is closed. The house is sealed. You are archived. And when someone else speaks the words, when they feel that same cold breath of familiarity on their neck, they'll ask, "Have you heard the story about the Millers? The ones who vanished? Back in Georgia, in 1832? And you'll feel something in you stir, something that smiles without your permission. And in a voice that isn't entirely your own, you'll say, "Let me tell you." End of transmission. The house lives again. Iterum.